All right. Okay. Every year, thousands of new species are discovered. Biologists use the characteristics of each newly discovered species to classify it with organisms having similar characteristics. The ways that we group organisms continue to change, and today these methods reflect the evolutionary history of organisms. So we already studied evolution and how biologists figure out which organisms are related, which ones are ancestors and descendants of previously living ancestors or organisms. And so taxonomy is the field of biology which classifies organisms. So if we look at early systems of classification, like I said, taxonomy is the branch that names and groups organisms. It basically classifies them according to their characteristics, but also their evolutionary history. I got the volume up okay. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Emerald Robinson, and in this What Is video, we're going to discuss taxonomy. Taxonomy is a system that biologists use to group organisms based on similar characteristics. Taxonomy is based on a concept called homology, shared characteristics that have been passed down from a common ancestor. Although humans have been classifying organisms by various methods since ancient times, Swedish biologist Carolus Linnaeus is considered to be the father of modern taxonomy. His most famous work, Systema Naturae, established a system we still use today to determine an organism's scientific name. This system is called binomial nomenclature. To understand what makes up the binomial nomenclature, we need to start at the top. Classic biological taxonomy usually places an organism into one of 5 kingdoms: bacteria, protists, plants, fungi, or animals.
There's actually 6 kingdoms. Bacteria is actually divided into eubacteria and archaebacteria. I'm not sure why they said 5 kingdoms, but it's actually 6.
Each organism is then classified into the following groups: phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. It is the genus and species that makes up an organism's scientific name. For example, the scientific name for humans is Homo sapiens, where Homo is the genus and sapiens the species. Sometimes scientists classify organisms using a 3-domain system. The 3 currently accepted domains are Archaea, single-celled microorganisms that tend to live in extreme environments like very high heat or salt concentration; bacteria, which are abundant and live in most habitats on Earth; and eukaryotes, any organism made of cells which contain a membrane-bound nucleus. Although we used to classify organisms based on characteristics that can be seen by the naked eye or under a microscope, today we commonly rely on analyzing an organism's DNA instead. Scientists will continue to use these means to classify the approximately 15,000 new species that are identified each year.
Okay. So Aristotle was the first person to classify organisms. I don't know if you remember, we talked about Aristotle in chemistry as well at the beginning of grade 10, because he had ideas about atoms. But 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosophers, there's a lot of them: Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, basically a bunch of dudes that sat around and just thought about like stuff like, what is life? Why are we here? What are things made of? And in the field of biology, Aristotle was looking at how can we organize all the different forms of life that we see around us. So the way that Aristotle classified organisms were that they were either plants or animals. And then he classified the animals as either land dwellers, water dwellers, or air dwellers. He classified plants into 3 groups according to their stem structures. So you can see from the diagram here, they were either soft stems, which included herbs, several woody stems, which includes shrubs or bushes, or one woody stem, which is trees. So this is how Aristotle classified life. Now, in the 15th and 16th centuries would be the 14 and 1500s. We had more and more species of organisms that we were discovering. So Aristotle's system was no longer enough to classify so many organisms. We also had the problem of naming things by what's called a common name. And the biggest problem with that is just the difference in language. So for example, if I see an organism that looks like that, in English, I would call that a fish, but you guys would call it blah, right? So just based on that, you can't use common names, because if you move to a different country where they speak to a different language, then that classification system no longer becomes, or is no longer valid. Okay. But it also didn't describe the organisms accurately. And this is the thing that kind of drives scientists nuts a lot. For example, jellyfish is not a fish, but a seahorse is. So using common names, and here's like a little diagram that I have, like in English is a skunk, but you have all of these little, not little, but all of these different languages that refer to it differently. So scientists wouldn't be able to communicate about particular organisms with any kind of accuracy because of the language barrier. So in the 1700s, the Swedish naturalist Carolus Linnaeus made a system of grouping organisms into hierarchical categories. And what hierarchical means is that you start with a broad overall group, and then as you move down, you narrow down into more and more specific levels. Now, at the time, there's a picture of Linnaeus. At the time, we didn't have a lot of technology, obviously, in the 1700s, so they relied mostly on morphology, or the structure of the organism. So Linnaeus' system goes accordingly. We start at the broadest, oh my God. We start at the broadest category of kingdom. And like I said, we've got 6 kingdoms. We have Animalia, Plantae, fungi, protista, eubacteria, and archaebacteria. And another system that can be used, I think I mentioned it, do they talk about it in this section? Maybe not. Hold on, I'm trying to look in the book to see if it has, domain? Yeah, okay, I do talk about it. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a minute. So these are the 6 kingdoms. And then when you break down the kingdoms, you have phyla, or phylum is singular. And then if you get more specific, you've got class, and then order, family, genus, species. Now, what we use to describe Linnaeus' system is something called binomial nomenclature. And nomenclature is it just means a system of naming. In chemistry, we talked about chemical nomenclature when we learned how to name ionic compounds, polyatomic ions, molecular compounds, like that. So nomenclature just means a system of names. And bi, of course, means 2 nomial names. So we always go by 2 names, genus and species. So for example, human, homo, and the genus is always capitalized, and sapiens, where the species is not capitalized. It, if you can, like in print, is always italic. And Homo sapiens translates to homo is man, sapiens is wise. So our species is basically named wise man. Okay, yeah. So another different system is called the domain system. There are 3 domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya, or eukaryota. I usually say eukarya. I've never seen eukaryota. But you can divide the 6 kingdoms over these 3 domains. So bacteria would be eubacteria. In the kingdom, archaea is obviously archaebacteria. Oh, the yellow is kind of hard to see. Sorry. Let's try red. And then eukarya includes the animals, Animalia, it includes the plants, it includes the fungus, and it includes the protists. So that would be the 6-kingdom system filed under the 3-domain system. I don't actually know when or where we still use the domain system because the kingdom system is obviously a little bit better for classifying organisms. Okay, so my trick to remembering the order of the 7 levels of the hierarchy, right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I remember kings play chess on funny green squares. That gives you the first letter of each level. And so this is what's considered a hierarchy because you've got kingdom up here and then phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So as you move down, you become smaller and more specific, and that's what hierarchy means. So the largest category, kingdom. When we look at 2 kingdoms, plant and animal, you've got the subsets, which is the next level down. For the plant kingdom, it's not called a phylum, it's called a division. And for animals, it's called phylum. And then finally, class, order, family, genus, species. So like I said, in Linnaeus' system, it's called binomial nomenclature. That means 2 parts. The first part is the name of the genus. The second part is the species identifier. And again, Homo sapiens is wise man. Here you can see our ancestors. So these are the organisms that we evolved from. So this is us. Our most recent common ancestor is Homo neanderthalensis. Those are the Neanderthals or the caveman. Homo erectus. Erectus means upright. So this is the first ancestor of man that walked upright. And then you've got Homo habilis, and habilis means handy. So handyman. And the reason why the species was named this way was because these ancestors were the first ones to learn how to use tools like fire and rocks and to hunt and things like that. Now, before Homo habilis, man as a species did not exist because you have a completely different species here called Australopithecus afarensis. And if you've ever seen the movie Lucy, that is that's the ancestor that you saw in the beginning of the movie. Basically, it looks kind of like if you combined like ape and human together, that would be Australopithecus. But that is not a man. That's not a human. That's a different organism. Like I said, the genus name is capitalized. Both names are either italic or if you are writing it out, it's underlined. So you can either have it underlined or an italic to indicate that it's a scientific name. So that's why it has to be either underlined or italicized to indicate that it's a scientific name. Now, the best thing about Linnaeus' system is that all of the names are Latin. So that means that different languages in different countries doesn't matter because all over the world we still use Latin, which is considered a dead language. Nobody actually speaks Latin in any country anymore, but it is used as a scientific basis for vocabulary. That's why I talk about vocab all the time. And so then we don't have to worry about language if everyone's using the same language. So here's an example. Amoeba, which I know you guys know, the scientific name for amoeba is chaos. And the reason why it's named chaos is because it never looks the same way twice. So you can see it moving around. These are called pseudopods, and it uses kind of osmosis to push different extensions out in order to hunt other organisms. So some species are describing the organism. The name can also honor the person who discovered the species or even be named after a famous person. So I'm just going to go through some examples of species that are named after famous people. So we have Alioides shakiri, which is obviously named after Shakira. Shakira is famous for belly dancing. So the parasitism by this species causes the host caterpillar to bend and twist its abdomen in various ways. And so that's why they named this species. I think it's a wasp or Alioides. Sounds like a mosquito. I don't know. Some kind of insect anyway. Obviously, it's a parasite. Probably it lays eggs inside of the host caterpillar, and then the larvae of this organism basically eats the caterpillar from the inside out. There's quite a few insects that do that. Here is Aptosticus Angelina Jolie, or Jolie, named for Angelina Jolie, and this is in recognition of her work with the UN High Commission for Refugees. Next, we have same genus of spider, if you notice the same name, Aptosticus, Barack Obama, named after my favorite president, Mr. Obama. And I don't know why. They don't say why they named him after Obama. Maybe it was discovered when he was president. I don't know. Next, Aristotelis gatesii, named for Bill Gates. Again, maybe the person who discovered it just really, really liked Bill Gates and wanted to name it after him, or maybe an organization decided. I don't really know how they decide, really. Here we got an aquatic mite from Puerto Rico named after J-Lo, probably because she's also from Puerto Rico. Maybe they just wanted to honor her with aquatic mite. Mites, by the way, are related to spiders and scorpions. And one of the funniest guys on TV, Stephen Colbert. This is again the same. I don't know what it is with this this tarantula, Aptosticus. Stephen Colberti. Let's see, television host. Yeah, again, it doesn't say why they named it after him. I guess maybe somebody just really liked him, or they just picked celebrities. This one I thought was really interesting. So this wasp, and it was discovered in Thailand. That's what I thought was really funny. So the Dementors, the species of wasp, are one of the most disturbing, named after the prison guards in the Harry Potter series. They have the ability to zombify and suck the life out of cockroaches with one sting, much like the Dementor's kiss. I think that's so cool. So that's named Ampulex dementor here, Ampulex dementor. Okay, so we either name it after the discoverer or famous people, or the name can indicate the geographic range of the organism. For example, Linnea borealis, and borealis means northern. The same like if we call the aurora borealis, aurora means light. So the northern lights, aurora borealis. And this is a flower that grows in the northern regions. Now, sometimes we find species that have been identified, but then also, like we learned in the last chapter, there are ways that species can split off and form new species. So sometimes these 7 levels are not enough. So taxonomists have established additional levels of organizations. We have varieties, which is a subset of a plant species, or for animals, we call them subspecies. So for example, we have this species of turtle called Terrapene carolina, but it is evolved into a new subspecies, Terrapene carolina triungui. So it's slightly different. And probably as the years go by, it would take a really, really, really long time for this to happen, but we might need subsets of subsets. Okay,